North America.
The promise of a better life in a foreign land has become increasingly alluring to thousands of Africans in the recent years. But sadly, these promises have often come under false pretenses of new jobs where millions are finding themselves in getting into form of modern-day slavery, especially in the Middle East, according to the International Labour Organization. We'll be looking into this in today's show. I'm here with my co-hosts Semingesh Yakoye and Amina Aliyu. Ladies, the situation in the Middle East with human trafficking is really bad, isn't it?
Yeah. Very, very. I mean, as you said, the situation of some of the African migrants can be referred to as a modern-day slavery. They usually go through this kafala system. It's a sponsorship program, and that means their legal status is tied to the employer. And take Ethiopia, for example. There were close to 500,000 Ethiopians in Saudi at some point, and they do mostly domestic work, and they do long hours, and most of these domestic households are they are very isolating, you know. So that means the employers can confiscate their passports, they withhold their salaries, and they work long hours, as I said, and they are also exposed to physical, mental, sexual abuses. So some of them really want to run away, and they end up in detention center, which is even sometimes worse condition. Yes. They try to commit suicide. And sometimes they find themselves in a hospital, and they wake up to find that their organ is missing. And I tell you, they say, I heard it from them, they say that the worst is after years of labor and after like sustaining some of these abuses, they could end up being deported without a penny.
A penny paid.
That is painful.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
Because all that work is really for money, and then you end up no money.
Exactly. You leave your family, you leave your children to go to seek a better life. Well, even if you know that you're going to be in domestic work, you're trying to provide a better life for your children or your family that you leave back home. And you know, you were mentioning Ethiopia and the number of Ethiopians that were in Saudi at some point. And it reminded me of one time I was going to Saudi, and you know how you have the Hajj terminal when you're going to Saudi, because it's just like a hop. So everybody flies Ethiopian Airways when they're going to Saudi.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing a lot of girls, a lot of young women rather, a significant number, and they were being separated from the regular passengers, and they were wearing blue shirts, and it had like a name of a company on it and a phone number, and clearly they were barely communicated. They're barely able to communicate with pretty much anybody. And I just remember looking and thinking, I don't know what this is, but this just looks wrong. When you go into a museum and you see school children in a group, you're not worried about that.
Right.
When I was looking at these women, trafficking wasn't what came into my mind, and it wasn't even about domestic work.
It looks very professional.
Yeah, but I was looking at it and I was thinking, I don't know what it is, but this just looks wrong.
Yeah. I mean,
somehow.
the way they're recruited, you know, some of them, they could come from rural areas
Right.
without any proper training,
Right.
without even knowing sometimes how to utilize some of the
how to fill out
equipment
a
in the
form.
kitchen, exactly how to fill out a form.
Yes, at the airport, a lot of times they ask for help to fill out those forms. Well, on this edition of Our Voices, we'll discuss these challenges and that many African women face in their quest for job opportunities overseas, especially in the Middle Eastern countries. We will hear what some African countries are doing to fight what is now known as modern slavery that is affecting mostly women and girls. What agency can victim turn to for help? What can women seeking employment do to ensure that they don't fall into traffickers' traps? We begin
by looking at the difference between human trafficking and legitimate employment agencies. Defined by the UN, human trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of people through force, fraud, or deception, with the aim of exploiting them for profit. Traffickers use violence or fraudulent agencies and fake promises of education and job opportunities to trick their victims. A job recruiter or a labor recruiter, according to the International Labour Organization, can refer to both private and public entities that offer labor recruitment services. Private entities can take many forms: profit-seeking or non-profit.
Well, it sounds like there is a thin line between the two groups. But to help us understand and identify ways women can find legitimate work and not fall into traffickers' traps, we invited Mrs. Banchi Yimmer, a former domestic worker herself. She's the founder of Nya Lenya Besedet, a Lebanon-based Ethiopian migrants' rights organization. Ms. Banchi Yimmer, thank you for being with us. Let's start by telling us, we know that not all work experiences in the Arab countries end up in horrific stories, but with your personal experience, please tell us about the harsh realities that many women don't consider when going there for domestic work.
Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to highlight this issue. First, my name is Banchi Yimmer, and I'm an Ethiopian, and I'm a former domestic worker. I worked in Lebanon for 7 years as domestic worker. When I start from my experience, like you mentioned, the reality when you arrive the country, you will work, and back home, what they will tell you, the expectation, two are unrelated. And they were promised to me I'll be get paid $250 and I'll have phone and I'll have a day off. And Lebanon is a Christian country, you'll have your freedom, you can go out, you can go to church, you can and meet your family. That was the promise and I've been given. Once when I arrived in Lebanon, they start in the airport, the slavery started, the slavery and the discrimination, the racism started in Lebanon. They took my passport. And I was kept in a small room for hours until the agent came and picked me. So since then, I never saw my passport. In 2018, I left Lebanon, and I'm currently in Canada. It's been 10 years since I saw my passport. So until now, today, I don't have passport. So I don't have any document at all. So that's what they start the abuse. And since I started working, I changed several houses. So some of them don't have food, and I worked and I kept in the agency. I've been sent home to home for his kids' fiancés or boyfriends or husbands to work for free. 6 months I didn't get paid. And the last house I worked is there is no food in the house. There is not enough food in the house. I used to spend at least between $75 to $100 from my salary to feed myself. There is no clean water.